Alright, YouTube, I'm trying to find something different to review as one of my first home video releases of a movie that I like. Should I do something off the wall? A creature feature? Something horrific? I don't know, man. Difficult decision. Wait a minute. Should I? Why not? So what's going on, YouTube? It's JeffMan316, your pop culture reporter, coming back to you with what's going to be a movie/DVD review. As you saw in the opening, I was trying to look for something kind of unique and off the wall to review, and I hadn't made a decision on what I wanted to do because I didn't want to pick one of my favorite movies to start, which if you watched any of my intro videos, Jaws and Halloween, or the original, obviously, are my two favorite movies, and I don't want to do those until I get a little more seasoned and figure out how I'm going to do movie reviews. And then I know I'll probably revisit them later, even after I do them at the beginning. But with that being said, I wanted to pick something that I could dig into and something that might has some popularity to it. And my son and I have been talking about viral videos recently. He was showing me photos that he had seen and couldn't figure out what the movie was from. And it was from the movie Begotten, just so you know. If you know anything about that movie, it's not something you can easily sit down and watch, as a family. And speaking of that, it led to other conversations like infamous movies like a Serbian film. Obviously another tough one if you wanted to try to watch that with someone. But you obviously know that the movie Megan is Missing has gone viral on TikTok. And so I figured that I would pick that because I actually kind of like the movie, and it's got, or at least some of it, and it's got some really good messages, but it is a hard watch. So I figured if I could review this, I could review anything. So before we get into it, if you do me a favor and go ahead and look at my social media links below and go ahead and follow me on those. And go ahead and like this video once it's done and make any comments you want. Let me know what you think of my review or the movie itself. And then go ahead and subscribe to the channel because I'm new and I could use the support. And hit the notification bell because as I do more of these in the future, you'll be the first to know when I post them. So let's go ahead and get started with the movie. And like I said, I got some notes here on my laptop. And so I had some really deep thoughts about the film, and I didn't want to lose track of them. So if you see me glancing at that's the reason. The movie stars two very young actresses, and I think they're playing 13 and 14-year-olds in the movie. And before their story even gets started, the director goes ahead and tells you in a little short opening that both Megan and Amy, her best friend, Megan is kidnapped, and then shortly thereafter, Amy is abducted. And they tell you that right off the bat. So then the first couple, let's say the first two acts of the movie, are the events that lead up to those abductions and how all that happens, and then the background story of the characters. So Amber Perkins is a young actress who plays Amy Herman. And her best friend is Megan Stewart, who's played by Rachel Quinn. The movie is directed by, and I think he even wrote it, so it's written and directed by Michael, I think he pronounces his name Goi. And I looked up his recent, let's see whether he had recently directed anything. And it shows that he's mainly only done television and done cinematography for TV, but it was for a couple things that I recognized. Riverdale and Swamp Thing, that's two things that I've watched. So it didn't look like he'd done anything with motion pictures after this. Not sure if this is the reason why, or whether he just made a choice that this was something he wanted to do and he went on to other interests. But the young actresses really haven't done a lot since then either. So be real interesting to see how, now, this movie was in 2011, so like 9 years later, going on 10 years, how they think this movie affected their career and whether they would have made a different choice about being in the film. So let's go ahead and get into the plot. The story to me is really about Amy. Megan is her best friend, but it centers totally around Amy and Amy's interaction with Megan and what happens between them and Megan's friends, and then how close they are together, and then what happens to Megan and how it affects Amy. And ultimately, you see more of what happens to Amy than you ever do of Megan. So, I know Megan is missing. It sounds like it's a great title, but it centers around Amy, ironically enough, and not Megan. So with that being said, you see at the very beginning through some videos, and that's how this story is told. It's through video footage, whether it be webcams or cell phone cams, or later in the movie, news reports. And then also Amy, who gets a video camera from her father, doing video diaries. So all of it's told through video footage that we see as we're like looking into their world. So at the beginning, the footage that you see is Megan and Amy talking to each other, and then through that webcam, kind of like we look into their world and we see how their parents, or at least Amy's parents, treat her. Amy seems to be a real centered young woman, if you want to call her that, a young girl, who is an honor student, who is really a kind of like a goody two-shoes, if you want to label her anything. And she has loving parents. I mean, you can see the interactions just at the beginning of how much they love her and care for her and want her, to succeed.
Always ganging up on defenseless men. All right, get ready for school. We'll talk about your present later, Princess.
Hurry up, Amy, you're gonna be late.
Megan, on the other hand, through the video webcam that you see of her and her interaction with her mother, it's nothing but a screaming match. The two of them are at each other's throats. Megan just constantly, wants to leave and wants to go somewhere else.
Game box, and I forgot to plug it back in. You forgot? You forgot? I worked 12 hours a fucking day to plug it back in. And all I worked on was my shitty program. And you got me quit on a fucking TV show. Lay off me. Go back to your box. Get the fuck out of here. Lay off me. It's out of here.
But the two girls actually are jealous of each other. Megan is really popular, but for all the wrong reasons. She's promiscuous, she drinks, she does drugs, she does sexual acts and favors for the boys in her friend circle. They're not really her friends at all. They're using her almost for entertainment purposes. But she's popular, and that's what Amy wishes she was, popular. On the other hand, Megan is jealous of Amy because of her well-centered life, like her family life, the way her parents treat her. Megan's father isn't even in the picture. Later in one of the video diaries, she even tells Amy that her mother's live-in boyfriend sexually abused her and nobody believed her. And I think he ended up in jail. I don't think it was because of that, but because the mother didn't believe her. But with that being said, I'm jealous of each other, and they really would like to have aspects of each other's life. Amy really wants to be part of Megan's friend circle, and Megan really wants her to be accepted by her friends. To the point at the beginning, they showed scenes from a party where Amy only gets invited because Megan bribes, through sexual favors actually, the guy who's throwing the party. And he wants Megan there because she's the life of the party. She entertains everybody. I guess when she gets drunk, they really want to see what she'll do at the parties. They don't want to have anything to do with Amy. And when she actually arrives, that's all they do most of the night is make fun of her and ask her, why is she there? At the party, Amy has too much to drink and actually throws up on someone. So she then catches Megan performing the sexual acts that I mentioned on the host of the party, and I guess she really sees how far Megan will go to please these people and to be their friend. So she really doesn't understand that.
Hey, Meg.
Hey, are you okay?
So stupid.
No, you're not. Oh, it was my fault. I shouldn't have brought you there.
You know, all your friends hate me.
So what?
So that leads to the two of them talking through some webcam videos, and Megan admits to Amy a lot of the sexual abuse that she suffered. And she also graphically describes one of the encounters that she had like at a summer camp. So the movie's very graphic. It's just surprising that they would have supposedly 13, 14-year-olds speaking this way. And if that's what they did back then, I wasn't aware of it because I was a child of the 80s. And I know the people that I was around, I guess maybe we weren't, hadn't been subjected to the internet and all the evils of the internet or whatever. Now, maybe other people did talk the way they did in this movie, but I know I didn't and my friends didn't. Things were a lot different 30 years ago, almost 40 years ago. So to get back to the two main characters, they're kind of drawn together because, opposites attract. So when Amy gets that video camera as a gift from her father and starts doing these video diaries, like I said, a lot of these conversations switch from the webcams to that. And it's recorded, interviews that Amy's doing with Megan and doing diaries of herself. Well, so around this time, Megan is talking online with one of her friends, and this friend introduces her to an online guy that goes by the handle Skater Boy. And Skater Boy tells everybody that his name is Josh. And so remember that point right there. It's one of Megan's friends that introduces her to Josh. This Josh supposedly can't show himself on his webcam because it's broken. He uses multiple excuses to different people about why it's broken. One that his dog destroyed it and one that his brother smashed it. But he does show them pictures. It's of a classic surfer dude, blonde, young guy. I think he says he's 17. And Megan is really drawn to him. And they have a lot of web conversations back and forth, even though she can't see him. He acts real shy. He seems to know just what to say. He makes her feel good about herself. He talks different to her than any of her guys in her life. So she's really attracted to this guy. And I think it's just, she really is desperate to find a normal guy who will like her. So during one of their conversations, she tells him that her and Amy are going to go to see a movie. And he tells her, well, maybe they could meet for some ice cream afterwards. And this is kind of the turning point of the story because Amy assumes that they go out for ice cream, but then the next day at school, Megan doesn't show up and she is missing and nobody knows where she is. Hence the title, Megan is Missing. So Amy starts talking to the Josh online too and wants to know if he's seen Megan, and he says no, that she stood him up, so he hasn't seen her. So she gets really, upset, can't figure out where she is. And obviously that's when they start peppering in some news footage describing, the situation with Megan. Is she missing? Did she get abducted? Did she run away? And nobody knows. Amy even gets upset to the point where she goes out to one of I think she calls it a safe place where her and Megan used to go, down by an underpass or something. And it's behind some trees, and they used to talk privately about things. And she's even got one of her teddy bears from her childhood, hidden away there. During one of these videos, though, Amy's all, upset, talking about where could Megan be. You notice that somebody's rustling in the bushes or the trees behind her, and you don't see who it is, but you kind of figure it's Josh, and he's been following her. So, Josh ends up contacting Amy, and she contacts him, I think the first time, and then the second time he contacts her back, and he's basically belittling her and telling her that Megan said that she doesn't know why they were friends, and that she isn't worthwhile, and that she shouldn't have wasted her time on her, trying to make her feel bad. I think he's just trying to push her away and scare her and make her not want to follow up on what's going on. At one point, he even admits that he did things with Megan that only 100 other guys would have done. But by saying that, he admitted that he was with Megan. So Amy gets really suspicious, and he thinks that maybe that this Josh kidnapped her. So she goes with her parents to the police and describes this whole story. This is the point in the story where they do a lot of news footage. Where they're interviewing people, trying to figure out what happened. They find some video footage, behind the convenience store where they met. It's only about 5 seconds. The movie does some really silly stuff about zooming in on it. You really can't see it, and it's grainy as hell. It's really hard to watch, so it doesn't really show anything. But they got this cliche moment in there where the news reporters get some people to reenact the crime scene or the scene to see if they can figure out whether she really was abducted. To me, there wasn't enough footage to warrant a reenactment, but I guess, like I said, it's a cliche moment that they do on, in news stories. There's one point in that, though, that interests me, because one of the guys who's going to do the reenactment version of Josh, the voice sounded familiar. When I did the research, it's the actual actor who does the voice of Josh in the movie. So I don't know whether they're playing this up as he's so smart that he volunteered to do the reenactment, or they hired him or whatever, and he really is the Josh character and they don't know it. Or was it because this movie is just so low budget they didn't know what to do and they went ahead and just used the actor because they're not going to show his face as Josh, you only hear him, and they got, double the bang for their buck there. So around this time, after all that's over, is where the infamous scene of the infamous title card that comes up that says Photo 1. And if you're not familiar with this movie, the director tells you in a warning that came out back when this movie was released, and he's since again recorded another warning about this movie on TikTok. And he says, you shouldn't watch it alone, and that the point that you might want to turn it off unless you really understand what you're watching is when this Photo 1 title card pops up on the screen. And so maybe I'll give you a little, if I've got a clip or some background, I'll show you what the director said.
Hello, my friends on TikTok. This is Michael Goi, the writer-director of Megan is Missing. And if you see the words photo number 1 pop up on your screen, you have about 4 seconds to shut off the movie if you're already kind of freaking out before you start seeing things that maybe you don't want to see.
So it's around the 57-minute mark when you see that, and may show 2 photos of Megan being bound, tied up, I think, at a table with her head through it, with her mouth spread open, and I'm not going to show it here. You can tell marks on her where she's been physically abused, probably sexually abused. So when Amy then does another video diary and returns to that safe spot again, this time shortly into her video, you see an arm reach out and grab her, and it cuts off, and Amy is kidnapped. And from this point on to the end of the movie is they show what happens to Amy, and you ultimately find out what happens to Megan because of it. But this is where it becomes the really tough watch. Leading up to that, it was mostly language that was kind of rough. The last 20-some minutes of the movie, they claim comes from unedited footage from Amy's video camera, because what happens is the police find the camera in the trash, and supposedly the last act of this movie is you watching the footage from that camera. So let's talk about the last 22 minutes of footage that's found on that video diary camera that the police find. After you see the arm pulling Amy away, most of the rest of it is footage that Josh took of where he takes Amy. So you find out that he's locked her in a basement that almost looks like a dungeon in an old horror movie. Inside of the room that he's got her locked in, he has her chained to the wall. They show multiple interactions with him. One spot, he throws water on her to bathe her. Another spot, he is trying to get her to eat and she won't eat. So he puts the food in a bowl. He's bribing her to eat it by giving her that stuffed animal, that she had from her safe spot. And he literally makes her get on the floor and crawl around like a dog and will not let her use her hands, and makes her eat from the bowl like a dog. And then he gives her the stuffed animal. Then one of the last interactions you see from inside her cell, or whatever you want to call it, is he pulls her out and he takes her in the room, and you know it's the table that they tortured Megan on. You can tell. He puts her on the table and he rapes her. And this is probably one of the most infamous scene in the movie. It's a pretty tough watch. I know it happens about, an hour and 5 minutes into the movie. The reason I mention that is I watched it the first time, when I first saw the movie, and this time I skipped through it. I think the director could have used a different technique for filming that. It's pretty hard watching. Maybe that's what he wanted. He didn't want it to be an easy watch. It ends with, Josh slamming his hand on the table in front of her, and he's got blood on his hand. And so, it's pretty powerful, but I really think maybe they could have done it a different way, and it might not have turned so many people off of this movie. I'll get into more of that later. In one of the last interactions they have, he tells Amy that she can leave. If she gets in this barrel, that he's got a blue barrel outside in the hall, and I think he says that it's because I don't want you to be able to tell people where you were, so I don't want you to be able to see. And then you've probably seen the still photo of what happens here. When he opens the barrel and she looks inside, you see Megan's dead body's inside of there. So I might show you that. But Amy screams. Eventually he ends up putting her in the barrel, and the next thing you see is he's digging a hole with her begging for her life, and he's going to put the barrel in it and cover it up. Well, we have to watch that for 11 or 12 minutes of her yelling at him, starting, screaming, begging for her life, to the point where then she starts saying she loves him and won't turn him in, and they could leave and she'll do whatever he wants, all the different emotions she's going through, trying to, she's panicking. And we legit have to see somebody, literally, I guess, from the waist down, maybe his legs, digging a hole for 12 minutes. And that makes up most of the last act of the movie. He ends up putting her in the hole, covers it up, and that's the last legit scene of the movie. Pretty weak, if you ask me. The movie ends with the credits, and you see some footage from Amy's video diary of her and Megan talking about all the things they're going to do when they grow up. And maybe, I guess it's supposed to make you feel really sorry for the two girls, because ironically enough, they didn't get to do anything much after that video was filmed in the movie, because after that, both of them were kidnapped and tortured, and they die. So that's how the movie ends. That's the end of Megan is Missing. So this DVD's got a couple of extras on it that are worthwhile, though. There's the person who founded the Class Foundation, which helps, I guess, families and victims of kidnapping and abuse and stuff like this. He goes into the positives, what he takes away from this movie and the lessons that can be learned. So then there's like a deleted scene that to me is kind of a waste. I don't know why it's not in the movie. I guess maybe it's because Amy does a video diary in it and actually admits that she thinks Megan is dead. And throughout the movie, though, Amy's kind of positive and hoping that she's not. And maybe that I've taken away from her character or something. And then there is a making of for like 6.5 minutes. But it does interview the girls, and it shows you that they're obviously way more mature than they were, and than they were in the movie. They were playing children. They both have positive perspective about the movie, and you can hear their thoughts. So with that, that'll kind of lead into the last part of my review is going to be what I do in a lot of films. I'm going to give you the good, I'm going to give you the bad, and I'm going to give you the what the is this WTFIT. Is there one of those moments in there? And you can probably tell from the way I described the movie, there's at least one or two of those. I would say it doesn't belong in the movie, or it definitely distracts you, or it should not have even been in there at all. I'll try to do that, or if it's just something humorous, I'm going to try to put those in most of my reviews. So the good, I would say, is the warnings about technology and the internet and how easy it is to fall in a trap like this. Give too much information, talk to someone you shouldn't. Parents should really pay attention to what their kids are doing online. Communication is the key. Even if you're not paying attention to what they're doing all the time, make sure you're talking about it and keeping it in front of them. this was long before we got this flood of found footage movies, so I'll give them credit. They were thinking about this outside the box back then. I know probably Paranormal Activity or a couple of them had came out, but kind of ahead of its time. I've heard that people said the acting in this is amateurish. Okay, it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be 13 and 14-year-olds. I actually think they did a good job of portraying that, and I think the young actresses should be being given some credit. They did a really good job. Some of their stuff, as childish as it sounds, that the stuff coming out of their mouth, it makes it a little more believable. Like I said, when you watch the documentary of the behind the scenes, if you want to call it that, you can tell they're a lot more mature than they act in the movie. So I think they do a good job. I'll also give the director credit, even though there's no way that this footage would have been as clean and crisp as it was on webcams and flip phones and stuff back then. The ability to tell a linear story by using webcam footage, video camera footage, and news footage and flip phone footage or phone footage, I think he did a really good job. Through the first 2 acts and up until that last point, I think he goes off the rails a little bit. But other than that, I think he did a good job with it. So that'll obviously lead into the bad. There's some older characters in this that play the teenage friends. At least one guy looked like he's at 30, 35 years old. I know as cheap as this movie was made, they could have got some child actor to play this just for scale, pay. He didn't really say anything any good other than there is a scene where I think he slaps Amy, but come on, man, you could have done better than that. Also, there's some parts in this movie that don't make any sense. Why would Megan's friends blame Amy for her disappearance? When Amy's filming that video footage I was telling you about, she returns to the scene, and they actually come up to her, multiple people do, and blame her for the disappearance. Remember what I said. It was one of Megan's friends who introduced her to Josh to begin with. It would be their fault, not hers. Amy's a victim here before she ever becomes a victim of the kidnapping and sexual assault. And then the reenactment video is total cliche, and I don't like the way they did it. And they try to take 5 seconds of footage and stretch that into, a scene in the movie, a reenactment scene. I still don't understand the purpose of that. They could have not. It just didn't even make any sense. So my what the is this moment is going to be the whole last 20 minutes of the movie for the reasons that I stated earlier. I don't need to see 2 minutes of rape happening to make the point of what this movie is trying to get across. I also don't need to see 11 or 12 minutes of somebody digging a hole. That's a little ridiculous. They could have done something different. They could have filmed it a different way. They could have, like I said, used news footage to wrap it up. They could have done something. But with that being said, I really do think the movie is worthwhile watching. It's worthwhile to also maybe discuss this type of content with your children. So it does have some merit. It's a tough watch, but I think it's worth you watching at least once. So I'm not saying this is going to be good for repeat viewing, but I think it's worthwhile to see it one time. So that's going to be my review of Megan is Missing. And I know I rambled a lot, but I really wanted to get some points across to make sure people understood that this movie is more than just a viral video. It's got some merit. It's got some meat to it. You need to really watch it to understand it. Hope you enjoyed my take on it. Hope you enjoyed this. I apologize for it being a little longer than I planned. But I do really appreciate you coming by and watching it. I appreciate any support you can give this channel too. Before you leave, can you please do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button and like it? Can you subscribe to the channel? Because any support you give me now will help me in the future. And then you can come along this ride with me as I review more movies. And then hit the notification bell, because when I start posting these more on a regular basis, you'll be the first to know. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap up this with my normal exit and just say this is JeffMan316, your pop culture reporter, signing out saying, yes, definitely, you guys be safe out there.